Hey everyone, thank you so much for attending RES 13's Raas Reboot Tech session. Before we begin, and before we meet our panelists and to dive right into the content, I'll be dropping a form in the chat just for you guys to fill out if you haven't already, just to see like attendance for who's coming and who's not. So I'll be dropping that in the chat right now. That's the attendance form. And then I'll also be dropping a Slido link just for people in the chat if you have any questions along the session. If you have any questions you wanted to put it anonymously, just put it in that Slido link. So we'll be dropping that in the chat. Cool. So now for this session and others for this weekend, we ask that you maintain proper session etiquette, which just includes remaining muted unless prompted by panelists or board, and then being respectful on Zoom. And we'd love to see your faces, and so please turn on your cameras. Now, I'd like to hand it off to our amazing panelists for this session, Praneeth and Srijay. Introduce yourselves, and the floor is yours.
Hey everyone. Are you guys able to see my screen? Someone say something because it's really weird.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Srijay, take it away.
Hi everyone, welcome. I'm Srijay and this is Praneeth, and we're here to talk to you about like videography and photography at your competition and how we go about doing that, how you can go about doing that too.
And then yeah, just to give you guys kind of a little outline about what we're going to be talking today. So first up, we're going to be telling you guys just a little bit about who we are, like why are we even like qualified to talk about that, not that we are qualified. And then we'll be talking about photography equipment and kind of like workflow with photos, videography equipment and workflow with videography. And then lastly, to close out the session, we have question and answer. To start off with, who are we?
So I'm Srijay. I have spent 2 years as the tech and design chair for Musty. Now I'm the director. I helped out with RES 12 as the tech affiliate and worked on some like the live stream and content stuff. Now I also do media for ATL Tamasha, and I've videographed, pretty much every single Maryland competition. I've also done Raas and the 614, I've done DDCon, and I've done, now in quarantine, I've worked with certain teams on videographing them too.
And I'm Praneeth. So my Raas experience started back in 2017. I was a junior at the time. I was a team manager for SLU Raas. And then the next year for RES 10, I was creative chair. The year after that for Legends 3, I was the tech chair. And finally, RES 12, I was director. And I photographed and videographed a bunch of competitions. I won't say them all out. This is as many as I could remember. I think there are a few more in there, but yeah. So to get into photography, just talking about like equipment, workflow, all of that good stuff. So it's weird that I put that in the first person or third person Praneeth uses, but I'll be just showing you guys some of the cameras that I use. So first up, I have the Canon 5D Mark III right here. This is my main camera. It is also the costliest. That's why it's my main one. But I also have the Canon 60 right here. This I got when I was a freshman in college. I would say this is a very good recommendation. Like this camera is not that much better than this one. So usually I'll switch between these two for competitions. The nice thing about this camera is, if you look here, it does allow you to put 2 memory cards in it. That's just nice where it's like you can record to both memory cards. So it's like if one decides to crap out, I always have a backup of the photos. And to talk a little bit about the lenses, I have the Tamron 15-30. This is a wide angle lens. Preet, Aleographics, he uses something somewhat similar. I think he's actually who recommended this to me. This is really good for getting group shots and also at mixers. And we'll go into more of what each of these lenses are meant for in a couple minutes. And then additionally, I also have this Canon 70-200. 70-200 just means this camera is able to zoom. So if I go ahead and actually, I think here we go. This is the zoom wheel. This is 70-200. I use this for show photos sometimes. Not my main one though. Ooh, sorry. My main one for show photos is right here. This is my 85mm 1.2. This is the one that gets me most of the best shots. Downside to this lens is, as you can see, it says only 85mm. It does not zoom. There's no zoom on it. It's pretty much stuck wherever you put it. So that means if you want to get a photo closer or farther, you really have to walk in or out. So it is a little bit of a pain with show photos. Next up, I have this Tamron 28-75mm 2.8. If you don't have this lens, I don't recommend getting it. Don't buy it. It is pretty crappy. Not worth the money. I'm just gonna put that one back in the bag. And lastly, I have a Canon 50mm 1.8. I couldn't find it this morning, so I can't show it to you. Srijay, if you still have yours nearby, go ahead and show it. And then last thing is, sometimes you might see me at comps with a flash on my camera. I use this Yongnuo YN560. Canon makes their own brand. I think it's like the Canon 500EX or 600EX. So those cost about $500 to $600. This costs $130. So basically, I was able to get 3 of these for the price of 1 Canon. I would say these are better value. They've held up. I bought them in 2017. They've held up since then. And then usually for like lighting, just to make it a little bit smoother, I'll use one of these like diffuser things. It's called a mag mod. Pretty simple to set it up. You just, oh, that was not as sly as I thought it'd be. Okay, set it up. You literally just plop it on. It has magnets, and then take it off. Just take it off. So that being said, just to kind of talk to you guys about general weekend workflow. So for mixers, usually I'll prefer a wide angle lens. The idea is it's like a lot easier to like weave in and out of action when you just have this lens. If you're using something where it's like, this is 85 millimeters, you have to zoom. That means it's like zoomed in a lot. So it's kind of annoying where it's like, you need to have a good set of like 10, 15 feet away from the people, especially at mixers where it's like people decide, like huddle up. You can't really be like, okay, guys, let's break the huddle and then give me 15 feet. So really, this is like the best thing to use, the wide angle, where it's like, you can just get in there. No matter how close you are, it'll still look like you're feet away. And then for pre-show photos, this lens, the wide angle lens, is good for team photos, but I wouldn't say it's the best. It does make the feet look kind of weird. It always kind of gives a little bit of a fisheye effect. So really, depending on the setup, I would recommend using the 70 to 200. It's really nice where it's like you can quickly zoom in or out if you want to frame the shot a little bit differently. And then, yeah, for both mixers and pre-show photos, I'll have like the flash setups, the 2 stands, plus I'll have one on my camera. The one on the camera is just telling the ones on the stands when to fire for the most part. And then that just really helps like light people's faces up. And then, as I said before, for show photos, I'll mainly use this 85 millimeter. Really, like this one gives like pretty good background blur where it's like it really separates the dancer out from the background. So it just makes it a little bit nicer in that sense. And then lastly, for awards photos, if I'm standing in the audience, I'll be using the 70 to 200 lens. It lets me zoom in and out so I can like frame it differently. But most of the time, my preference is to be on stage. And for that, I'll use the wide angle lens. A lot of people are like running and stuff. So it's like this one, yeah, again, it just lets you get right in there, get right in the action. Workflow continued. So usually when I'm photographing in competition, it's really just going on the comp's agenda. Like I've noticed, like this is not like a fact or anything set in stone, but usually it's like Raas circuit, Raas competitions. They'll place more emphasis on getting like team photos before the show at the mixer, and Bollywood not as much. And really, it's just like go with the flow with that. Like I remember when I was doing my first competition, I think it was like a Bungver competition, was like my first alone competition. I was like, oh, when are we doing like the team photos? And then they were like, oh, that's not a thing. I was like really like, what's going on? And over time, I finally like kind of started to learn like, okay, it's really just like you're going with what the comp wants. So most of the stuff I'm talking about here, though, is like my rundown for Raw stuff. So just giving that for disclaimer. So usually at the mixers, a lot of Raw comps, almost all of them, they'll start with like the teams entering and you do team photos to start. And the first thing I got to say is you're going to have to rush the teams. It sucks, but someone has to be the bad guy. Sometimes you might get lucky where there's a board member there to be the bad guy, but most of the time you're gonna have to be the bad guy. And really it's just how much the time the comp gives you. It might be 5 minutes per team, might be 10 minutes per team. And your goal really there is like, just get in and out as fast as you can, get people to get together. I know a lot of teams will trickle in where they'll be coming up the elevator or something and you're just like waiting for the rest of the team. So a good thing to do then is just like get whatever photos you can. Like if all the captains are there, sure, get a captain's picture. If all the guys are there, get all the guys. And then this is something that I like to call the add, then subtract method. So usually when I'm trying to get photos before I'm at the mixer, one thing that I'll do is it's like bring in one group of people. So it could be like girls first, then you bring in the other group, team photo, maybe get a funny whole team photo, then team plus liaisons, and then you take out that other group of girls and get finally boys. The reason I do it this way is like you could do it where it's like you do a whole team photo, girls pick, then you have to tell this group to come back to get their pick and then tell this group to leave. So it's a little bit easier where you have like one come, the other come, that one leave. It just speeds things up a little bit. And just to show you guys this, these are some photos from Raas Chaos 2018. Started with the girls pick, then we got the team pick, team and funny, and then lastly, the boys pick. Tech time, I would not recommend taking photos at tech time, like not like signing up for the full gig. I did it 1 year. I would say like, I've never actually seen one of those photos get used. One of the big things for me is like, what is the utility of these photos at the end? Like, are people going to use them? Are they going to cherish them? And really from tech time, I've never seen anyone use them. Maybe some of the latter teams will, but like a lot of the earlier teams where it's like they just woke up, they're like still in like not their PJs, but like they're like in their like workout clothes. They're not going to be like posting those photos. They don't really care for them. And this point isn't as important. I don't think many dancers get distracted, but like alternatively, similarly, you don't want to distract the dancers. And then lastly, it's like the thing that I do recommend is go to the venue and get a couple test shots. That's like tech time is the perfect time to plan out where you're going to stand, check out what the lighting is going to look like. The best thing to do is like try taking photos when they're doing like their full run through. That's like your kind of like full run through of like what it'll look like that night. And the last thing is you can like iron out any surprises. I've been to a couple venues where it's like I'll go there to take photos, and then the venue staff is like, no, you're not allowed to stand. You have to be sitting. You're blocking the audience view, and that's just like a big headache where it's like, okay, could I have gotten this ironed out in the morning? Pre-show. So these are pretty similar to mixer photos where it's like usually you'll be taking team pictures, board pictures, same type of deal. I would recommend using the 7200 if you have one. Alternatively, this also works, the 15-30. Really like this one's a little bit more open to what type of lens you would use, just try and fit everyone in the shot. And then here's just kind of like a breakdown of what photos I get. Pretty much the exact same breakdown as the mixer team photos. The only thing is I add in like captains, time permitting. It's always nice to get a picture of the captains. They worked pretty hard. Not worked pretty hard, they did work hard. So just to kind of illustrate this point, oh, this is one key difference. Usually for show photos, I'll try and get the team picture first. You never know when you might get cut for time. So it's really good to like get the team photo because it's not like, you don't want a team to only get like a boys pick and then have to like leave. So usually I'll start off with the team pick because it's probably the most dire. Then here we have team plus liaisons, girls, boys. We did have some time that day, so captains. For show, my recommendation is pick a side, left or right. For some reason, like this is definitely not like a set in stone fact or anything. I've just never been a fan of taking pictures in the middle of the stage. I don't know. I think side profiles of people look better. Definitely not a fact though. I've definitely seen some great middle photos. So yeah, I would say test out whether you can switch sides. Like you could stand on the right side, move to the left side during a performance. My personal thing is I don't do that. Like I'll switch maybe between performances, but usually it'll take you like 30-40 seconds to run across, and that's like 30-40 seconds you could be taking photos. So usually like I'll just stick with one side for one performance and then maybe switch to the other side for another performance. Well, additionally, it's like make sure you're not blocking the audience. And one thing to really iron out with the board of a comp before is ask for space/seats to be blocked in advance. Like ultimately you do want to be standing to take a photo, and sometimes it's like there might be people sitting behind you and you're blocking their view, and that's just rude to them. It's like a bad situation for everyone. So if you can get those seats blocked off. And this next point, try and stand if possible. Let me see if I can kind of like demo this. Basically the idea is it's like when you're sitting, you're like looking under a dancer, right? So like if I go like this, oh man, you're getting like a ton of double chin. It does not look good. So when you stand, you're a little bit higher, so you're getting a little bit less double chin. Like I'm not saying that anyone has double chin, but like ultimately no one looks good from like a bottom angle. Like just look at that. No, it doesn't look good. So I'd say try and stand if you can. It's not the most comfortable. Definitely a good workout on the feet though. This next point says don't let people get too close to the camera. I'll elaborate on this a little bit more later. It's more like you shouldn't get too close to people while you're taking their show pictures. I'll explain why. Really, like the idea is like the closer they get, the shallower your depth of field is. So like if they get really close to the camera, it's like very hard to get them in focus. Like dancers are moving really quickly. So it's just like they move out of focus, in focus, out of focus, out of focus. So you get like a lot of rejected shots. So it's like a little bit better if you can frame it so they're a little bit farther away. Next thing, have fun with it. I'd say like when a competition is like looking at like, hey, do we want to hire this person? They're really looking at your show photos. They're not really going to be looking at your mixer photos. They're really looking at like, okay, what kind of art can you create here? So really have fun with it. You'll be surprised with what you can do. And then the last point I'd have is if someone's like hair is whack or they're having like a dress malfunction, just don't take photos of them. Like, and I'm not saying that to be like mean, but there's just a couple things with it. One, like they're having dress malfunction. I doubt they want photos of themselves being taken. Two, they're not going to utilize those photos. Back to the whole utility thing. And three, like they're having a malfunction. There's also 17, 18 other dancers on stage that have also been working very hard. So it's like, you could always just turn your camera and take photos of someone else. And then for intermission, I say anecdote time. Basically, there was one competition where I was taking photos. It was all going great. During the intermission, some guy was like, hey, can you take a picture of me and my friends? It was kind of dark. So I like adjusted all the settings. I took a photo of him. Photo came out fine, great. The problem was I forgot to adjust the settings back when I went to take the show photos for the second half. So literally the first team that went on, like team 5, half of their photos were junk and I had to throw them out. Luckily the team was SLU, so they didn't mind too much. I am from SLU, so I was just like, hey, sorry guys. But I would say like intermission, just like leave your cameras on the same settings. Don't change it. You might forget to change it back. Lastly, awards photos. This again really depends on the venue. I would say, I'm trying to think. I think maybe like 95% of the venues have let like the photographers come on stage. My preference is to be on stage. There are a few photos I try to get of every team. One is you want to get a photo of every single team on the stage, just kind of like go around. And then for every placing team, it's nice to get a photo of them running to the trophy / grabbing it. That action shot really is nice to look at. And then additionally, just kind of like a pose photo afterwards of them with the trophy. And then lastly, it's like, be as courteous as you can. These are like placing teams. If they want something, just like go ahead and give it to them. Like if they want a photo of like just like one of the members plus the trophy, go ahead and do it. Be nice. And then this is the last point that I want to make. If parents are on stage or near stage, it's always nice to offer to get a photo of them and their child, their family. Those are like photos that I like. Those are actually like my favorite photos to take. I don't know, maybe I'm too scenty. So this is just like illustrating that thing of like, if you're staying on stage, here's like a photo that I got with this wide angle lens of UIC, Illini Ross. It took me, not UIC, UIUC. I don't know why I forgot that. They're only 2 hours for me. Illini Ross on stage. This is one of those action shots of a team running up to the trophy. And this is a posed photo. And this is by far the most important point I want to make in this presentation. You don't need expensive equipment to take good photos. I feel like yes, I have all this expensive equipment, sure, but literally like this is the combination I started with. So I'd say like, one, it's more about the photographer than the equipment. You can do really good things with very, not like cheap equipment, but lower costing equipment. So like this is the combination I started with, a Canon Rebel T2i or upwards. The T2i released in like 2012, I think, so it might be a little bit old, still takes great photos. And then that 50mm 1.8 lens, those are a great starting combination. I put some pictures of some eBay listings here. I just found these like really quickly. So the camera costs about $153. The lens, that's like $124 new. But I'm telling you, you can find that thing for like $70. So it's like starting to be like anywhere from $220 to $250. And I have some examples of photos taken with this equipment. I want to preface, these are not my photos. They are Preet Mandavia's photos, Alio Graphics. But when I was rising through the ranks as a photographer, I always looked at these photos and thought like, oh my God, these look so good. So these are from RAS 7. That was in 2014, 7 years ago. Was it 7 years ago? 2015. It was 6 years ago, sorry. But I feel like they still hold up really well today, despite being 6 years old. And he used a Canon Rebel T3i plus a 50mm 1.8. So pretty much the exact equipment I showed you. And as you can see, like photos look pretty immaculate. I've always looked up to these photos as really good photos. Next thing I want to walk you guys through is a quick editing demo. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. I'm going to whip out laptop number 2 to do that. And then, yeah, if I'm like looking down, it's not because I'm like not looking at you guys, just because I'm like looking at the screen, sorry. So we'll go ahead and I'm sharing my screen. Sorry, 1 second. So I'm going to open up Lightroom Classic. We have here we have a couple modules. I'm not sure entirely what they all do, but basically all my work happens between library and develop. So in this library module, I'll go ahead and hit import. And I have the option to select a source. So I'll go ahead and select RAS Reboot Demo. And sorry, Zoom always puts like the screen share thing right in the way. So I'll go ahead and choose that I want to copy the photos, and then you choose where you want to copy them to, and I'll do import. So that'll go ahead and import them. Just give that a second. And we'll just start right here. So this is that first point that I was talking about where it's like, you get really close to a person, it's very hard to get them in focus. Like if you look, I'd say like the focus of this photo is right here, maybe, and then everything is just gone. It's like, you get like maybe like a couple centimeters right there. But that being said, it's like, there is some beauty that comes with being so close to someone. Not, okay, that sounds weird, but like being so close to photograph someone. So it's like, I'm going through these photos, right? Like, and I'm looking, I'm like, okay, no, yes. See, so this is like the beauty that comes out when it's like, you get really close when taking a photo. It's like, sometimes you do end up nailing the shot where it's like, okay, I got her in focus and I was able to get everyone else out of focus. So I'll just show you guys some of the things that I might do when I'm editing these photos. One thing that I usually like to do is up the exposure just a hair. I don't know if it shows up on your guys' end. then add a little bit of contrast where it's like it brings in the colors. Her face looks a little bit bright, so I'll bring down what are called the highlights. Maybe not that much. I don't want it to look too orange. And shadows, I'll leave where they are. There's another function here called clarity. I would say never touch that. It just makes people look weird either way. So I usually just leave that at 0. And then last thing I'll do is I will add a little bit of a vignette. It probably won't show up much on this photo because the edge is already black. And then the key that I use is go ahead and if you tap B on your keyboard, it adds it to the quick collection. I guess I removed it. So let me add it to the quick collection. Another thing you can do is you can just do Command C or Control C, sorry, to copy all the settings. So like, let's say I'm really like loving how I edited this photo. I can just go ahead and tell it like, hey, I want to copy these settings. Maybe I don't want to copy the crop though, because every photo might be cropped a little bit different, but I copy them and go to this next photo. You know what? Like, it's all right. Like, I think I could work with this. So I'll go ahead and paste those settings on, just Control V or Command V and paste them on. And that's usually my workflow where it's like I'll copy and paste, and that's like, you can just do minor adjustments from there. Like here, I think those settings made it a little bit too bright. So I'll just bump the exposure down a little bit. And you know what? I'll keep this. And one of my ideologies when like editing is if you're in doubt, like, oh, should I include this photo? Should I not? I always lean towards include it. Like people love to have options. They'll love to see like, hey, I have a lot of photos. And we'll just keep going through this. Reject, reject. Out of focus, so I'll reject it. This one's all right, so I will keep it. It's a little bit too bright. And then like, as you can see, it's like out of like that line of like maybe 10 or so photos, I only got to use 3. That's because it was so like close up. This is a different here we go. It's a different competition Rungilo. So for this, I'll do like, let's say I paste in those settings, just for sake of time, I'll keep those settings. I'll add this photo. You know what? This one looks good enough for me. This one is a photo that I've always been a fan of. One thing that I might recommend for this one is cropping it. So if I click R, tap R on the keyboard, I can just crop it. And usually I'll like look at like this little tick mark on the top, try and center it with like the center of the person's head. So that's like, then they're centered in the photo. This doesn't look too centered. So I'll go ahead and move it over a little bit. And here we go. So that would be my final version. Another thing you can do is like, if you don't want to copy and paste the settings onto all of them, you can just select all the photos at the bottom and then paste it onto all of them. So it auto adjusts all of them. Go through that. This one, it's like the photo's all right. Not too big a fan of it. Nope. This one, I think I can work with this one. So I'll go ahead and add that one. And then just going through, but like ultimately, like a lot of these photos, like contrast these before, they are in focus. Maybe they're not the best angle, but like no one is blurry. Like had I gotten a better angle of them, these would all be like photos that I could keep. So that's just like another pointer of like why it's like good to have some distance. And then here's just a mixer photo from Raas 10. This has like both flashes set up, so they're like very illuminated. I'll go ahead and paste my settings onto this one. Here we go. Ooh, way too bright. So I'll drop the exposure a little bit. And you know what? I think I'll up the shadows a little bit. And then I think this is a photo worth keeping. I'll play around with the vignette. So here's a better example of where you can see what vignette is. This is way too much. This goes in the other direction. Usually I do just a little bit where it's like it puts a little bit more emphasis on the people. Copy those settings. Going through, we have another mixer photo. Out of focus, probably will not use it. This one, wide angle. Nice thing about this is I was literally right next to them when I took the photo. Here's a contrast of where I use this one, the zoom lens at the competition. It does give a lot nicer background blur. Like if I go back to this photo, you can pretty much see like everyone is in focus. Like I can see who that is. I can see who that is. But like if I come to like this photo where I use the 85mm, you can see like it really separates out the dancer. Like I cannot see who that is. I know it's someone from CMU. I can't tell who it is, but you get the point. Going through, this is another example of that where it's like it really gets separated from the background. And then here again, wide angle photo. This is like nice where it's like I was able to get all of these people in focus. These people not as much, but I was able to get a good chunk of people in focus. And lastly, this is just illustrating that point of getting an action shot, pose group photo. And yeah, that's pretty much everything from me. I'll pass it off to Srijay.
All right, let me open up this screen share right now. Okay, can everyone see my computer? We're good? All right. So welcome to the videography part of this presentation. So this is kind of the equipment that I use. This is not the only piece of equipment that you can use. I use a Panasonic GH5. I chose this camera because it had a lot of versatility, and because I do a lot of videography outside of just competitions. But this is honestly is kind of overkill for a competition. The things that I would prioritize in the camera are making sure that you can have some kind of power system to it. So I'll go into that in a second. And then also making sure that you have clean HDMI output. So with some cameras, when you plug an HDMI cable into them, you're not going to be able to get clean output. It'll kind of show a bunch of stuff on it. So you want to make sure you can just Google, Canon, whatever, clean HDMI. Like the first camera I had, the T5i, doesn't have clean HDMI. So that's like the biggest priority you want. That's because you're going to be connecting your camera for live streaming. And so you want to make sure you have that clean output. And the second priority you want to have is seeing if you can get like a camera that does work in 4K, because you want to have that quality, especially when you are so far away from the stage. You want to have that quality to your footage. For the lenses, I use the 18 to 35 Sigma EF. So my camera is called a micro four thirds camera, which has to do with the size of the sensor. And EF lenses are a different type. So I actually adapt it. So the EF lens adapts to the micro four thirds body. And then I also use a 30 Sigma micro four thirds to get technical about it. The other parts to this, for like an average competition, I'm using a Camlink 4K, which is this small device that I'll go into in a little bit later. And I'm just using a tripod. Honestly, any tripod works. You don't need like a fancy fluid head tripod or anything like that. A ball head, just like the photo I have right here, is all you need, because a ball head is great when the camera doesn't move. A fluid head is what you need, which is much more expensive and much fancier when the camera does move. Now, if you're doing front row, you are going to need a slider and fluid head, but I'm not focusing on that. I'm focusing on my workflow for live streaming and back row. So a little bit about workflow. Important thing is you want to be communicating your needs ahead of time for the competition. Especially if you're doing like front row and video, or if you're doing photos and video, you will need a volunteer, because you're going to want to have someone to start and stop the video recording of your teams. And that's because you don't want to have like one huge long 2-hour file at the end of it, because in 4K, a 2-hour file is going to be like 100 and something gigabytes, and that's not going to be manageable for you to work with. A lot of what goes into videography is how can we defer risk in order to make sure that we deliver the content at the end. You also want to establish when you're going to deliver videos. Usually for me, I deliver raw footage to teams within 24 hours, and I deliver finals when the season ends. And you also want to know, when are you going to get the reg materials? When are you going to get like your intro videos and your mixes, etc. One really small thing, I would get your reg materials ahead of time, and I would download them before the comp, because sometimes teams will be tight on Google Drive storage space, and then they'll delete it. And I had a case where I had to reach out to a team. I was like, hey, I'm working on your videos now, and you kind of deleted your mix off of Google Drive. Can you resend it to me? So just download it ahead of time, because they won't delete it before comp. You want to arrive to venue by about half the tech time. You really want to make sure you have ample time to set up, so you're not rushed. Like, if you wait till like an hour before show, you might not have enough time to set up. You also don't, especially if you're doing like photos, you definitely need to set up during tech time, because you just won't have time. And then the last thing you want to do is you want to decide where to shoot, and you want to be higher up and central. And higher up means that formations are visible. So let's like look at a couple examples. This was not mine, but I like talked to the videographer who did do it. So here we can see Buckeye Mila. The videographer was like off to the side. So she wasn't centered, and it kind of takes you out of it, because the idea here is we want to be letting the people watching the video feel like they're audience members. So when you're like to the side, you're not getting as good a viewing experience. And you can also see she just has so much black space over here. And we definitely want to minimize that as much as possible. Here's another one. This is mine from Musty. At Musty, we did not have a balcony. So I had to keep the camera like at audience level, at floor level. And even though I zoomed in a ton, I'm still getting a ton of black space because, and you can see here, like I can't see the model's formations at all. Like they're just like vibing there and it's like, okay, cool, you're there. Like, oh, what are the formations? I have no clue. And so what we really want to do is we want to take up the depth of the frame with the stage. So like here, like the stage is taking up like what? Maybe like an inch of my screen space. But here it's like taking up like half the screen space. And that's what we wanted to be able to do because we want to be able to see the formations. And this really maximizes how much of the screen is like focused on the video. And we're trying to capture everything again here. So a little bit more of workflow, at least an hour before comp, we want to be setting up the live stream. And setting up a live stream is actually not too hard. You just want to connect your HDMI from your camera into the cam link. So basically what the cam link does is it takes like an HDMI input and it turns it into like a USB output. So that basically allows like your computer to be able to process the HDMI input, and it allows it to be able to send it to like YouTube or Twitch or wherever you're live streaming to. And then you plug your cam link into your computer. And then you're gonna use a software called OBS for sending to YouTube. There's a lot of tutorials on how to set up a live stream. Some of the newer cameras don't need like this cam link device. A lot of them can actually plug into your computer. Like I know a lot of the new Canons, like the Canon M50, the Canon T6i, I think, a lot of them can plug into your computer directly and be an input. I've never tested that. I've never used it because my camera doesn't support it yet. I will say one thing. The live streaming is probably the riskiest part of what you're going to do, and it's the one that has the most points of failure. If I'm looking at like when I'm using like my regular Mac as a live streaming device, I have my camera plugged into my cam link plugged into a USB-C dongle, that USB-C dongle plugged into my laptop. That's like 3 points of failure there. I also have Ethernet plugged into a dongle plugged into my laptop, another couple points of failure there. What happened for me is at 614, my cam link just stopped working. Like basically this HDMI part right here got a little loose. And so the cable wouldn't sit properly in it. And I basically didn't have a live stream for 614 and we had to do it off of a phone. And so you want to have a backup cam link. You want to have, I actually like found like an old gaming laptop online that like had built-in Ethernet, built-in USB-A, so that I was able to remove the risk of having like random dongles that were, causing risk to me. And again, if you have like a camera that doesn't even need the cam link, still keep the cam link on hand because you don't know what's going to happen, and you want to make sure that you have a backup option, because if you need to like substitute in someone else's camera instead of yours, then you can't have that flexibility. And also an important thing, make sure that you have a way to get wall power to your camera. So for me, I have this thing that like replaces the actual battery in my camera and plugs it into the wall. And then that's how I'm able to take wall power. You don't want to be running this off of a battery power because especially if you're not there, it could die, especially if it dies in the middle of a team, like that's not good. I had that once where it died in the middle of an exhibition team, thankfully. And they were like a home team. They loved me, so it was fine. And they also were competing the next weekend. So it was like totally fine that their like piece got cut short. But like if it's like an actual team, like you don't want to do that. Some other things, if you're not going to be with your camera, as an example, if you're doing like photos or front row, have a volunteer on hand to start and stop. Again, we don't want to have like a huge file because that's also that huge file is also very likely to get corrupted. And you can deal with maybe one team getting corrupted. I can pull like their video off of the live stream or something. You don't want to have an entire comp corrupted. Start recording during the intro video and start recording after the applause. You don't want to miss anything. And so when you're starting and stopping, stop, wait like 2 seconds, and then start again, and make sure that it's rolling. Like you need to make sure that you're visually confirming that it's rolling. It's very, very important that you start during the intro video and stop after applause, because you don't want to miss any of the teams. That don't try to be like, oh, let me be efficient with storage space and like start just as they're starting and stopping. Make sure to make the live stream private at the end. A lot of teams don't like their videos out, and it's just like, all right, come practice in the round circuit to do this. And this is something I like to do. I like to send videos to teams within 24 hours. A lot of teams are competing week to week, and they don't care for quality of footage. They just care that they have their footage instead of just like a screen recording from YouTube. I'll like either toss them all onto YouTube, or I'll toss them into the Google Drive folders. And again, this is just so that you have a value add to the teams. And now I'm going to do a quick demo. Yeah, Saket, rip Moksha. That was quite unfortunate. Saket has been my volunteer for running videos before. Give me like 1 second to open up Final Cut. Any questions so far? Well, Final Cut's opening. Sorry. My computer is slow.
I guess like I can ask like one of the questions on Slido was, what programs do you use for live streams, if there is a program?
Yeah, so I'm using OBS, which is open broadcasting software. It's free. It works really well. Like I've never had an issue with it. Also, I'm gonna turn off my camera because it's being weird right now. I've never had an issue with OBS. And yeah, it's very simple to set up a live stream. All you do is you go into YouTube and you get like a live stream key, and you just stick that into OBS, and you'll go, and like there's tons of tutorials out there. One day Final Cut will open. But so I can give you like an idea of what I am doing in Final Cut. What I'm doing is I'm just going to take the video, I'm going to sync in the audio from like the team mix, so that way like it's high quality audio, it's audible very well. Some people don't do this. I think it's a really good idea to do it. You want to have your audio synced in. And then what I'm going to do is I'm literally going to just add like, make some minor adjustments to the video, and then I'm just going to touch it up and add logos and intro video. So here's Final Cut. There are a ton of different programs to use. I use Final Cut because I've been using it for a very long time. But you don't need to use Final Cut. You can use DaVinci Resolve is free and available for everyone online, and I highly recommend it. I use Resolve myself too. I'm just faster in Final Cut. So what I'm going to do here in Final Cut, and your workflow will vary depending on the program, is I'm literally just here. I'm going to right click them, and I'm just going to hit Synchronize Clips. And that's what it's going to do, is it's going to listen to the audio waveforms, and it's going to find where they match, and it's going to pick them up. And so here we're back with the mall. So the original file here that I'll have is has a bunch of this like extra black space from the intro video. And so there's a lot more than just this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at where the mix starts, and I'm just going to cut it down right here. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lower the volume for the entire track basically. And I've lowered it all from like, 0 decibels to like -15 or like -12 or something like that. The reason you want to not completely mute it is like, think about like, some of the times I do capture audio that's like maybe like some teammate like yelling like really loud, like go VT or whatever, etc. And like it kind of adds a little bit to that immersive experience to have audio from them audible. And then here, what I've done is I've just raised the volume just slightly on the end for the applause part. That way it makes you feel like you're more in the zone there. So I'll share sound. So, we're hearing this.
Take cover. Take cover. Take cover.
Right, and so then now I'm feeling like I'm a lot more there. And then you can also, so then what I do is, you know, I will put in like intro video right before this. I'll put it in the comps logo right before the intro video also, and then I'll put my logo in right after. But then the bigger thing that I'm going to do here is I want to make sure that like this looks right. So as you can see right here, kind of the stage is a little bit off. Well, actually, I already adjusted it. So here, this is the original footage, and the stage is like a little bit off rotation. So I'm gonna like rotate it a little to fix it. There we go. And then I want to zoom in just slightly because there's too much black space. And then, oh, that's zoom out. And then I'm gonna move it maybe a little bit over to the left. And something I might do is I might just like add some color to it. I might adjust the colors. I'm not gonna really do that here. That's all I'm doing in terms of editing. It's like a very simple workflow. What gets tedious with it is that like at an average comp, I'm doing like 10 to 12 of them. So just make sure you find like a couple hours to get it all done, knock it all out. And I've done like, I'll do like a couple comps in the night sometimes. But other than that, yeah, that's all there is to editing. Praneeth, if you want to share like the last slides.
Yeah, 1 second. So our last thing is super quick. Sorry, Sujay. So last thing we just want to talk about is like how to charge. Like when I mean charge, like how do you build a competition? So I'd say like the first thing to like even just get started is one, start building up a portfolio. Most competitions will want to see some sort of prior experience. Like they want to see like you have some sort of substance before they're going to even think about paying you. And then along with that is point number 2, build up a name. This really ties in with number 1. So it's like I remember when I was starting, when I was first trying to like get comps on board, I was like, please hire me. Like I had nothing to show. So it's like not unreasonable to think that they didn't want to like pay me a big amount of money. So it's like, once I did build up a name and did a bunch of competitions, then comps are more open to like, okay, let's hire this guy, and we're willing to hire this guy. And then that kind of goes into number 3, which is like work cheap to start. I'm not saying like you need to work for free or anything, but yeah, that is like definitely a good place to start, is like work your way through the ranks. Like there are a few competitions that I did for free where it's like they really did help me build a name. And still, even to this day, I cover the national competitions for free mostly because like those are just great exposure. I know like there's like a whole thing online where they're like, exposure doesn't put food on the table, but like doing those national competitions really does like help you get hired for more competitions. And the last point is finally know your worth. Like I'm saying like, oh, you should start out working cheap. At the same time, it's like once you've gone to a certain point, like people will always try to like underscore you. They'll try and offer you a bunch less. Like I remember one competition, my offer was $750. They returned with $250. And that was a point where I said like, okay, I have to know my worth. I'm not doing this competition. So I just said no. Like there will always be another competition. Don't do something cheap just because you're like, okay, it's more work. Like know your worth, build up your brand. And those are my main tips. And yeah, we wanted to open up for question and answer.
Also a great way to like, if you want like that first thing, is to like reach out to comps at your university. Be like, hey, I'll like, you know, my portfolio started off with doing Maryland comps for free. You know, if there's like a ISA showcase or something, you can do those for free. And then you can leverage that to start doing comps. So any questions?
So one of the questions was, so I guess I'll make it general for both of you. So you guys kind of touched on it, but maybe you can elaborate a little more on it. What happens when like, you know, your camera settings like mess up, like Praneeth mentioned, but you don't realize until the end of the show? Like, is there any way to fix that? Like, what would you do in a situation like that?
So yeah, with that, I would say it's different for both photo and video. Like when I'm taking photos, usually I'm like, I'll still like look every so often to like see a preview. So like usually I'll like if it's like kind of like a little bit of a downtime lull in the performance, like probably just for a few seconds, it's like quickly look at like, hey, what am I getting? Like, are these lighting settings okay? So I'd say like if you do that, where it's like you're just like occasionally checking, you'll never have a situation where like the whole comp is gone. Like with that experience I was saying about like the intermission, like I got lucky where I finally like decided to check halfway through the performance. And I was like, oh crap, these settings are not right. So I was able to only like miss half of performance. And then it's just like apologize as much as you can. With video, I feel like it's a totally different arena. Like most of the time, it's like when you're like covering a comp video, they're also expecting you to do something else, like Srijay had said. So it's like you don't really know till the end, which is where it's like the real prompt comes. I was gonna say like maybe look at the live stream. I don't know.
I always look at the live stream like between the like first couple like after the first team, I'll definitely go and double check the live stream. You know, I will have like my AirPods in, so that way I can like hear the live stream and make sure that it's all going well. I basically am double checking often to make sure that like everything is running smoothly, especially if I'm not with the camera at that point. Like I'm double checking it. There's like some things that you can always recover. Like if you shot it, like if you exposed it too dark, then you can always brighten it later. You might get noise in it. You can always recover, and you can definitely process your video later to start fixing things. But your best bet is to just double and triple check your settings. And like again, if perhaps like you're missing like recording some of it, well then you can always fix that by going through and pulling from like a live stream, etc. Like they'll have like multiple sources to pull footage from.
Yeah, that makes sense. So a more general question, like how did you guys get started into both like photography and filming?
Okay, I'll go first. So back in like high school, my parents bought this camera and I thought it was like really nice. So I was like playing around with it. And then my mom got mad at me where she was like, don't ruin the family camera. Then I was like, okay, you know what? I want my own camera. So I bought it. So I really started to get into photography in high school. And it was like just that equipment that I was saying, like it didn't cost that much back then either. It was like $250. So my dad was like, okay, you did like good on SAT. I'll get you a gift. So that's how I started to get into it. And then just like in college, I was doing it more and more. And then finally that, like I said, I started out as like Raas's manager. So like at a couple of the competitions, I really didn't have much to do like during their performance. Like I'd like hand them water bottles, but that only takes like a few seconds. So I was like, you know what, let me like try getting some like side stage photos. That's really where I like started doing like more comp photography. Videography, I just always thought that was like cool, like doing like live streams and stuff. And then like I saw how bad quality some stuff was, and I was like, you know what, I think I can like do this better. So I started to really get into it. Some of my first live streams were really bad though, so don't judge me on that.
Yeah, for me, it was I started like I've always had like a semi interest in it, and I started doing media for Musty, and then at Musty, like we needed someone to handle live stream, and I was like, okay, I'll just do it myself. And so then I did it for like Musty, Minza, and Mayuri, and I was like, okay, this is cool. And like the other Minza had another videographer, Alvin Alex. And so when he was there, like Alvin and I, and then also Mithan Thomas had come for Maj. And so Mithan and I, like I sat down with both of them. I was like, hey, like I'm like starting to get interested in videography, like both comps and just like in general, like how can I do this? And like, so I like, you know, I basically like had dinner with them and like they kind of taught me a lot. And then from there on, I bought my camera and then like I started like emailing, like I emailed DDCon and I was like, hey, can I like, you guys are coming to DC, can I be like a videographer? And they're like, sure. That's kind of how it just like started snowballing from there.
Cool. So like kind of piggybacking off that, like is there anything you wish you had known before you guys had started photography and videography?
You will mess up and like don't be stressed about it, and like the more you do it the less you'll mess up, and so just keep on practicing and like keep on recording stuff. It's like a muscle. Like the more and more you do it, the better you are at it.
Yeah, the only thing I wish I'd known was like that you could like do it earlier. Like I didn't really start getting like really big into it until like my senior year of college. And I did it for like another year after I was like done with college. And I was kind of like, okay, I'm done now. I really do wish we had like done it a little bit earlier, like more like freshman, sophomore year. Like if you guys are like, any of you guys are just like freshmen or sophomores, definitely reach out to competitions. Like no one like looks at your age or anything. They really just look at your work. If you have good work, go for it.
The next question, I think Shriji kind of touched upon it, but are there any like free editing programs that you guys recommend?
I want to say DaVinci Resolve is free. That's what I use when I'm editing videos.
Resolve is free. I don't know about photo programs. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not a photo guy, so I don't know if you know anything besides Lightroom.
Yeah, photo programs, like, there aren't many free ones. So Lightroom costs about like $10 a month. Alternatively, like, okay, this is gonna sound kind of janky, but like the Photos app, like if you have like a Mac, the Photos app does actually have a lot of different things that you can do. Like a lot of things that I showed where it's like adjusting exposure, highlights, shadows, you can do that in the Photos app itself. Like maybe the workflow won't be the nicest of like importing photos, exporting them, but it'll get the job done. And actually, no, even with that, I know a lot of universities, like the Adobe will give you like some sort of discount. So that's definitely something to like look into. And also like, pretty sure most school computers, especially like, I want to say like every college will have like a design lab or something. Like if you go over there, like they'll have all the softwares there. Like, yeah, you got to set the computer for 2 hours. Usually they're like beefed up computers that are pretty nice to work with.
And this next question, I think it's for you, Praneeth. Are iPhones a good tool to start with for photography or no?
You know, I always say iPhones are gonna put me out of business. I remember there was a few years I wanted to be like a wedding photographer, and I was like thinking, like, I was like, you know what, in 10 years, like someone will like, they just won't have them anymore because everyone will have like their iPhones. I'd say for dance photography might be a little bit hard. Like one of the things that's like really important with dance is it's like you have to like what's called a fast shutter speed. So it's like that's kind of like the camera is like only like capturing 1/500th of a second or 1/400th of a second. Because it's like if you do something where it's like you leave the shutter open for a second, you're gonna get a lot of what's called like blur. It's like if I was going like this, it's like you'd see like the whole trail of it. I'm not sure like iPhones have that many settings where they like let you get fast enough. For me, it's like I think like the slowest I can go is 1/200th of a second, and then like really that's like cutting it where you're starting to see a lot of blur. There might be apps that let you get that slow, but like iPhone might be a little bit difficult when it comes to like doing actual like dance photography that way.
One of the things I will say iPhones are great for is like the amount of like dance teams that have just recorded stuff on their phones like in the past year. Like you can get like a cheap iPhone gimbal for like, you know, $70 and you can put it in there and you can get great footage. iPhones for video are actually really good. The thing that might not be great about it is like your positioning, how close you are. And one of the things for like comps is there's a lot of like light on the stage and sometimes they can't handle all that much light. So you just have to be careful with iPhones. But especially if you're like a team doing like a 5-person video outdoors, iPhones are great. iPhones are amazing outdoors because of all the light.
On top of that, I would actually say maybe iPhones are better for live streams sometimes. I remember the first year I did like Gateway to Raas, like everyone was like super hyped for the live stream and it just did not work. There was no internet at the place. Someone was like trying to hotspot it with like their Sprint phone. I was trying to like hotspot it to my laptop. It was just like, it just never got off the ground. Like maybe there's like 3 minutes working. Next year, all they did was they got a Verizon iPhone. They put that thing on like a tripod that cost like maybe $10, $15 on Amazon. They ran that and it worked. So it's like, if you're really like stretched on like what to do for internet, my recommendation is find someone with a Verizon iPhone and just stream it from that. And it's like, it'll hold up. I don't actually have Verizon myself, but like they do have the best service. If you're got a rich friend, get them.
And do you guys recommend any like workshops, courses, maybe in YouTube videos to kind of learn the methods of photography and videography?
Yeah, so there's like a bunch of different channels I used to watch back in the day. I can put all the links at the end of the presentation. There's one guy, his name is like Tony Northrup. He has a lot of videos. I'm trying to think. There was like this other one that was like really about weddings. Not really much about dance, but just like photography in general. There's like a lot of things. I'd say Tony Northrup is like the best where he's like explaining the theory behind it. So it's like you kind of understand what you're trying to do.
Yeah, honestly, just like is so much content out there. Like Parker Walbeck and like Full-Time Filmmaker is like a great one that I will watch a lot. Potato Jet is another great one. Like there's some everything I've learned is from YouTube.
Yeah, exactly the same for me. Like I never took any like real course or anything. It's just like watching YouTube videos on like how to do this, how to do that. And then I don't think I said this while I was editing. When I'm like editing photos, and this goes for like anyone, like really you're just like using what looks best to your eye. It's not like there's like any like formula or anything. You think like, okay, this looks better. That's probably what looks better.